details for you to provide a booth. My name is Corinne Heinze and I'm one of the organizers today. So I think we're still waiting on a few people who are probably struggling to find the parking here today, but I think we'll just make a start and then they'll just come in as we go. Just a few things on housekeeping. There is no fire drill supposed to happen, so if any alarm goes on, please make your way out with me. Toilets are just right outside there, and also on the first floor some more. We'll have a video team here on board, so Shay and his colleagues. So if there's anybody who doesn't really want to be filmed, just let me or Shay know. Otherwise, you can also just send me an email today and say, oh, well, if I'm on any of the videos, please make sure I'm not going to be on any social media or videos that are created out of that. Lastly, we are part of the ESRC festival, so if you have a Twitter account, please feel free to use your phone and to tweet about the event today. I'd like to introduce our facilitators as well. So we have Paul Patterson, Matthew Broom, then Mary Quinn, and Anne Green, and Maria Mikhail will come in a second as well. So we'll have some group work later on, so if there's any questions, just feel free to ask me or any one of them. Okay, so now I really would like to introduce our first speaker, Paul Patterson. He is public health lead for Forward Thinking Birmingham. And very passionate about young people and improving their mental health and well-being. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Corinne. And great. So many people made it, despite it being a Saturday, a difficult day to come along to any event. As Corinne said, I work at Forward Thinking Birmingham, the 0 to 25 mental health service for Birmingham and the city. And I've been working in NHS services in Birmingham for over 20 years now, really, in partly a research role, partly a service development role. Very interested throughout that time in how we can actually prevent mental illness from reaching a crisis point at the earliest opportunity. And we've learnt a lot along the way from great work, people like Matthew here and many other innovators and pioneers. A lot of that work has actually started originally in Birmingham, so it's been great to be part of all that. I wasn't quite sure about what to say. I mean, I'm certainly no specialist in education and employment and mental health, but I think a lot of the core issues that are relevant to mental health in general are absolutely relevant to work and how we get work and actually resilience through work. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things I was picking up on. Here's a nice little info escape about health of UK employees. And one of the things that really stood out for me was that 1 in 8 of current employees reported having a mental health condition. And this was from a labour force survey in 2014. So 1 in 8 are actually declaring that they have a mental health condition in work. And I think you'll understand that in some professions, particularly in health, and of course especially in mental health, the numbers of people who have been impacted either personally or through family members is much higher than that. So first key message for any young person worried about mental health issues, how that's going to impact on their ability and their eligibility for work. Absolutely not. You know, you're not alone. People, you will have allies and comrades wherever you choose to work. Something else that obviously work and employment is, as I said, a primary determinant of health. And it's a protective factor in terms of people's esteem, people's confidence, people feeling valued in a work situation. But it's really important to identify that there has to be a match between fulfilling work and the individual. And a lot of work, people feel, well, you know, I need to earn money, I'll do that. They get into a job role and they find it's absolutely not for them, and hence ongoing frustrations, a lot of difficulties. The match hasn't been right. And of course, a lot of us were brought up to think, well, we just need to get a job and get on with it and other things will sort out. But actually, work is a core part of our identity. And being out of work also becomes a core part of our identity. And if you're in a work situation where you feel it's frustrating, or indeed there are adverse events going on in the workplace, bullying, difficulties, you're not actually going to benefit. In fact, your mental health will probably be impaired. And that goes back to these issues where health conditions and mental health conditions, absolutely, there's a cycle that interacts with how your job is meeting a match with your needs and abilities. I think also it wouldn't be me if I didn't want to raise the topic of the importance of early environments and how adversity in childhood has a major effect on our early resilience and the development of confidence, self-esteem, and the ability to use networks and to seek help when needed. Adverse child experiences, I'm not going to go on about them now, but if you haven't heard of this, please look it up. There's a website, ACE is Too High. There's an awful lot of information about this. But it's understood now that the more adversity a young person experiences in their childhood, the less safe their environment, the greater the impact long-term on not just their mental health, but their physical health, their likelihood to have interactions with criminal justice, their likelihood to be homeless, a whole host of social, environmental and forensic outcomes. So stressing the importance of the safe, secure early environment and family is really something that I think plays into work as well. If you go through school feeling you're dragging an awful lot of trauma-related weight around, it's actually can be a hold-up in terms of feeling confident about going for the job and feeling you deserve to achieve and thrive. And that's something that a lot of young people we speak to in mental health services report, that they don't feel they deserve a positive life. They somehow blame themselves for an awful lot of that difficulty that they experienced in early childhood. And that's something we've really got to counter at every opportunity. I'll obviously leave these slides, but it was just occurring that, there's the older I get, the more interrelated I see issues are and how interdependent we are. And of course, there's been a lot of talk recently about the physical environment, the impact of greenhouse gases, climate change, and whether or not you believe the science is robust. I think the evidence is very much in our faces at the moment that we are breaking records in terms of temperatures and amounts of the Arctics and other parts of the world being impacted by global warming, etc. And to me, the sort of toxic stress experience of childhood is a kind of reflection of how we're treating the planet as well, and the real need to recognise that we need to be kinder to ourselves, to the people around us, to the planet, and it has to start with ourselves. We have to value our own agency in the world as a starting place, and that only comes through supportive networks, through feeling safe and secure, through building that resilience, and this and the workplace are absolutely intimately connected. Of course, nothing stands still in this world of ours, and there's always change. And change always looks good, or it's a bit scary, but is appealing. But it's also, if you think of it as a fork in the road, if you go down one fork, something else, some other experiences, some other potential outcomes are also lost along the way. So Yes, it's wonderful to have progress and change, particularly in medical and health sciences. They help us have better quality of life and, can be inspirational. But actually, it's important to recognise there are limitations to the benefits of a lot of change. And it can be unsettling. But of course, brings many opportunities as well. And I absolutely see the workforce of the future looking very, very different as a result, particularly of the digital revolution that we've had. Which brings me on to a little bit of the positives. What can we be doing about all of this? How can we best support our population, our young people to feel confident, secure, ready to thrive, ready to grasp opportunities and to know what it is they want out of life? And of course, our colleagues at the Institute of Mental Health, the Social Policy Unit, have been working to really pull together the most up-to-date evidence that really tells us to have a resilient population, we need to look at things and be working and planning in a very different way to what we've been doing thus far. And that involves a different workforce. It involves more investment in prevention in early years, building resilience, investing in community, investing in things that people value. And indeed, all of this evidence has been pulled together into a report that can be downloaded at the Institute of Mental Health web pages at the University of Birmingham. And I'm sure colleagues would be very happy to encourage that. What else do we know about resilience and confidence and getting people ready? Well, colleagues here from Ripple, amongst other places, did a lot of work on the 5 ways to well-being, the importance of really basic things we can all do to connect with others, talk and listen, be active, take notice of the world around us, keep learning, and actually to share your time and value contact with other people. And I think particularly, taking notice, it often gets forgotten, and the example of the little tweeting happening at 2 levels, I think resonates with me. The world is impacted by how we interact with it. And I think, again, we need to be aware that our agency and what we plan and the direction we take and every interaction we have with other people has an impact on the wider ecosphere and the wider world of human beings and social impact. I was always, from decades ago, really taken by the work of psychologist Erik Erikson, and I think he had a really good overview of the importance of investing in early developmental stages. And at a lecture in the 60s, he told the students that the richest and fullest lives attempt to achieve an inner balance between 3 realms. So work being one of those, but love in terms of personal relationships, and play, i.e. creativity, investing in play and creativity, absolutely vital. And that to pursue one realm, or one of these, and disregard the others, is to leave yourself open to the potential of being relatively unfulfilled in older age. Whereas pursuing all 3, and I know it's all about a balance, is it's possible to really have a fulfilled life. There will always be challenge, but investing in these 3, not focus on just one, is really important. Also, I was looking for inspiration in the media, and I was just struck by this chap who, after 2 years in Stoke, looking after a disabled partner and relative, was very frustrated at his situation in terms of employment. And he just decided one night he was going to get up, make a sign, and stand out in what turned out to be torrential rain until somebody actually took his phone number, and he made some contact. And sometimes, that occurred to me, you need that level of frustration and motivation to actually make that change. He was rewarded a few hours later in the rain by actually bagging a job that actually suited him. So, you know, lives can change very quickly. And I remember a conversation I had with a young chap many years ago who was feeling somewhat sorry for himself and quite impaired. He had been unemployed, been working in very basic manual labour jobs for a couple of years. He'd sort of taken to his bed and you know had spent weeks reading at night, throughout the night, sleeping through the day. And his background was somewhat, you know, he had some relative level of adversity. He had a parent with psychosis. He'd had been excluded from school at a late stage. He'd left home and was attempting to find work in a new environment. And all of these things were occurring to me when I was looking at this character's story, that you know, it requires sometimes just a complete flip and a change in attitude to really get on with it and grab your dreams. And what is it that stops people actually changing in those moments? Sometimes it's investing too much in the anxieties around change. No matter how much, you know, trauma or difficulty we've experienced, there are endless life stories and cases of people who've really overcome those challenges and created positive worlds, created networks, invested in themselves and in other people. So sometimes it is important to make that jump. And the last point, more or less, is, of course, based on that golden rule, values of compassion. I mean, this should be something that employers, potential employees, all of us really invest in as a first rule. Don't do unto others what you wouldn't want done unto yourself. And so many people have said this. I like Confucius because he was one of the first. So what does all this mean in summary? Well, you're not alone. It can be a struggle, life. But, you know, other people are out there. There are plenty of people who've experienced mental health difficulties in active employment. Work should balance with creative play and close personal relationships. It shouldn't be one or the other. We need a combination. We need to meet work halfway. What's your true motivation? What are the things that drive you? And treat others how you'd like to be treated. If we could all adopt that as a first principle, I think the world would be, you know, a more positive place. And of course, you know, I fully would admit that young people listening to me going on about what they should do, how they should overcome their fears and address these issues, can seem a little bit perhaps uninspiring in the sense of, well, you know, I've got a nice job, I've got a house, a car, I've travelled the world, I've been lucky enough to lecture in different countries, and I've done a lot of the things that I feel quite happy about, and you know, a lot of that was through education. And of course, that, you know, young man I referred to earlier was me, and the thing that changed, I suppose, my role and my motivation was really deciding that I wanted to get an education. I remember standing in the canteen at Kingston-on-Thames Polytechnic. I'd been getting rid of some bitumen from the roof there. I was covered in grot, and all the lovely shiny students were, you know, making way for me. And I was 21 at the time, and I thought, this is where I want to be. I want to engage in that world. I think I probably can. And I decided at that point, you know, it was time for a change. So I'm not saying, well, if I can do it, you can do it, but it really is one of those things that, you know, you've got to meet it halfway. You've got to really invest in what you want to do. And yes, anything is possible. you can do it. So thank you very much. And I really look forward to hearing the other speakers, because I think we've got some really good, innovative thinking here in the room.
Thanks so much, Paul. Just to give you a quick update on the time, we have the lunch scheduled for, I think, 2:15, but perhaps we'll shift it a little bit to 2:30. There'll be lunch put up there in the middle of the talks today. Right. Okay, I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker today, Anne Green from City Ready and the Birmingham Business School. Anne is Professor for Regional Economic Development, and she has recently been invited to join the West Midlands Combined Authority Employment Support Task Force. And today she would like to talk about evidence from employability initiatives with regards to jobs, skills and well-being.
It should be here in a minute.
It's there, yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to talk really about mental health. What I've done over the years is look at different employment programs and how different initiatives have tried to help people into work. So I'm looking at this much more from a labour market, skills and employment point of view. What I want to talk about over the next 15-20 minutes is these themes. I want to say something about the context and how it's changed. I want to say something about pathways to employment, examples of programmes that have tried to help people into employment, young people, what progression actually means in employment programmes, and then lessons and conclusions as to what we can learn from some of the evidence, at least over the last 20 years or so. And this is rather a dense quote, but what I wanted to highlight here, this is taken from Hansard at the end of October, saying, the key points are here in red, that young people remain at a distinct disadvantage in the labour market. This is Stephen Timms MP, and he's saying about how unemployment rates are higher for young people than for the rest of the population. And also suggesting here that more than 1 in 10 young people are out of work and looking for a job. And I want to highlight here what he thinks they should be doing. They should be building the skills to secure for themselves a lifetime of employment and in a position to contribute to the economy. But also highlighting that we have a lot of needs, people who aren't in employment, education or training at all. So that's very recent. But what do we know about the labour market? We know it's changed immensely. We know it's changed a lot since I left school, when actually it was quite easy in 2 or 3 years before I left school to get a job. When I left school, it wasn't very easy at all. And things have changed enormously since then, with far more people staying in education for longer. But the sorts of jobs young people used to go into have declined. We've got more young people in part-time employment, temporary employment, and 0 hours employment than in the past. And young people are much more concentrated in those sorts of jobs than our older workers. And that reflects the fact that there's far more young people going into manufacturing employment and many more into services. So a very, very big change, and particularly in the West Midlands, as was the case, say, in the 1980s and even in the 1990s, etc. But in this changing labour market, we might also think that employers perhaps expect people to be work-ready rather than trained on the job. And that puts much more onus on young people to have soft skills and work experience in order to gain their first employment. And that's quite a big change in the labour market over, say, my lifetime. There's also a big issue about what do young people and what do employers expect. And an organisation called the Chartered Institute for Personnel Development, they produced a report 2 or 3 years ago saying employers are from Mars, young people are from Venus, trying to highlight how there's a mismatch between expectations of what employers thought would happen in the recruitment process and what young people thought was expected of them. And I think this is kind of made personnel directors think a lot more about how can we kind of close that gap, how can we get over that mismatch. And I think it's also the case that employers find it quite difficult to assess how young people with limited work experience, how they can present themselves to employers in such a way that's appealing to employers. And I think there's also a very big difference in recruitment methods used by employers and job search channels preferred by young people. And I think we've seen an enormous change in how jobs are advertised, the rise of social media, websites, etc., and the demise of local newspapers that used to be the way even 20 years ago. So enormous changes there as well. We can think of a pathway to employment, and it may be very nice if people went from pre-employment to employment entry to staying in work and then in work progression. But in practice, we know that that's rather linear, and people can move backwards as well as forwards. So they may stay in work for a bit, they may face a challenge in their lives and have to go back to pre-employment, employment entry, etc. So I think we have to get over the idea, we have to work towards employment programmes that do recognise that people do move backwards as well as forwards, and hopefully that step back isn't too big a step back. I'm going to say something briefly about a whole load of employment programmes we've had in the UK, and one that we've got now for people moving on to universal credit is called the youth obligation. And there's not actually very much research on this, but what does exist in terms of disadvantaged young people, they're supposed to be on this for 6-month intensive period, but we're seeing that young people are withdrawing early. And there's 3 main reasons for this. It's because they have pre-existing difficulties in their lives. They might have a whole range of problems, including mental health issues. They may run into a specific problem, and for some reason they can't attend when they have done, and then perhaps just through fear or embarrassment just don't go back. And then there's some people who just leave because they just don't like it. But what we also know is the positive part is that what people did really appreciate is initial engagement with somebody that helps them to make an individual plan, identifying their interests and the support they need to get into work, and also practical mechanisms for identifying and applying for jobs. But I think it's also worth pointing out that on this there's actually relatively little acknowledgement of whether young people are actually ready to find work before they're actually moved on to this programme. So that's something that's happening now. We've had, and I won't go into this because I think people have interest in other things, but we've had a whole range of other programmes in the past. And some of these have been mandatory. People have been required to go on them. And that was the case with the work programme. We've also had sector-based work academies, sorts of initiatives that offer training, work experience and a guaranteed job interview. And actually, if you can get training, work experience and a guaranteed job interview, those 3 things working together, that can be extremely helpful. We've also, in the recession, had something called the Future Jobs Fund. This provided subsidised employment. And what young people liked about that was that these were, in quotes, real jobs. They weren't sort of made-up jobs, they were real jobs. And in 6 months, it gave them a chance to show really what they could do that you can't necessarily do in 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. And then even 20 years ago, we had in Tony Blair's government a huge programme called the New Deal for Young People. And I think what I want to just highlight from that was that it was participants with qualifications, people with GCSEs, good GCSEs, that were much more likely to leave for a job than those with no or low qualifications. And for those people who didn't have good qualifications, the greatest impact of that programme for them was moving into full-time educational training. So what I want to highlight there is that skills do matter, and people get on better if they do have those qualifications. It really does help them progress in the labour market. And I want to say something about a programme, and I'm very pleased that James Godsall from the Big Lottery Fund is here, because this is a very interesting programme called Talent Match that's been running for the last 5 years. That's a bit different from some of the mandatory programmes I've been talking about. It tried to help support young people who were furthest from the labour market through holistic, personalised, flexible provision. And it was really looking at trying to support young people's needs and aspirations. It was a voluntary programme, and it's co-designed with young people. So it's not doing things for them, but with them, so as to speak. I want to just say something about the learning from Talent Match. I think the underlying tenet of this, and this resonates with the previous speaker, is that confidence, self-belief and well-being are really key to progressing along the journey into and within employment. Another key feature of Talent Match was that young people had their own key workers, people that they could, that were working with them on their issues and trying to help them into work. They were really on an employment journey and also on a social journey about enhancing their well-being. And I think also when we're thinking about employment and skills, there's really, we mustn't forget about employers. They are the gateway to jobs, and in Talent Match there was a role for employers in both involving and shaping the programme. And just so we can see something about why Talent Match is relevant for today, there were 21 Talent Match partnerships, and these are the sorts of groups that they tried to work with. And I want to highlight particularly they were working with the long-term unemployed, but also many of them, and a key feature of this programme, was working with young people with mental health issues. And I think this became quite prominent. Many of the young people were presenting with various mental health issues to the programme. So, how were young people involved? Well, they actually were involved in the governance of the programme. They acted as champions for the programme, and they could influence policy and practice locally. They could feed back to employers. And this is an example of somebody who was involved in a Talent Match programme in some way, and he found it initially difficult to speak with other people, but he sat on a recruitment panel, and I think this is a very interesting feature and one of the things that I always take away from Talent Match. How sometimes when new staff were employed, it was the young peoples themselves that actually sat on that recruitment panel. And if you actually sit on the other side of the table, you actually get an insight into what employers are looking for. And that actually also is not only enjoyable, or it can be enjoyable, but it actually gives people confidence boost and gives them insights into what employers are looking for. What we also found about involving young people in this particular initiative was that actually the involvement of young people helped improve the service quality. It helped move people closer to the labour market. The statistics from the programme show that. It supported them in building their confidence. But I think it's also important to highlight that a whole range of non-employment type activities are really a complement to, rather than a substitute for, much more sort of job search type activities. But overall, I think Talent Match has showed that increased voice for young people in designing programmes leads to greater effectiveness and greater efficiency. And if we think about progression in employability programmes, standard programmes would particularly look at, do they work in terms of monetary? Do people get a higher pay rate? But actually, if you ask people about progression, yes, money is important, but it's also about increased job stability, flexibility in a job that helps them meet other requirements in their lives, and also about jobs that suits their preferences. And I think this is highlights how really, if we had that kind of pathway, we often think also about ladders in employment. But really what we should be thinking about is climbing frames. If people are supposed to be working until they're more or less 70, many young people now, we have to think not only about just going up one route, but how do you navigate your way across the labour market? You know, move sideways to move up, move down, move along. And I think that analogy of a climbing frame is what employment programmes of the future are going to have to be looking at much more. Now, we looked at Talent Match and how Talent Match measured progress. You can see in red the sort of standard things that are measured in employment programmes. But I want to highlight very much a key message that came through was that a job that suits aspirations is very important for young people, and also that doesn't negate the fact that a more highly paid job is also important in terms of achievements, in terms of perhaps moving on to live independently, etc. And the concern with well-being was manifest in Talent Match. And at the start of the programme, every person going onto it had some information collected from them. And then 78%, or about 3 in 4 of people who actually started off with a very low score on life satisfaction went on to record a higher score at a later date. And there's all sorts of progress that people on Talent Match self-defined for themselves. They could make significant progress, reasonable progress, or limited progress. And I just want to show you just a few quotes about what this might be. The significant progress was somebody that actually didn't know what they wanted to do at all, and actually then had been through a series of work placements. They weren't necessarily in work, but they were much more defined as to what they wanted to do and where they would end up. They felt that they were on a pathway. The second person said they made reasonable progress. They actually got a job, but it wasn't the job they wanted. They wanted to do IT work, but they'd rather have had something else. And they'd want a job that doesn't involve dreading getting up in the morning. And some people didn't make any progress at all. That was a relatively few. But this is an example here of somebody in a job that really was a simple job. It was a rather unsociable job, but he just felt absolutely trapped and stuck in it. So although he was in work, he felt he hadn't made progress at all. So finally, what are the lessons that we can learn from employability programmes over the years? I think what we're learning now is that there's need for much more integrated support for both work-related issues, which a lot of classic active labour market policies are focused on, but also non-work issues, which are actually essential to help people progress. I think improving well-being and confidence has been identified as absolutely key, and counselling and peer support can be very important here. And a lot of employment programmes either haven't had enough money or haven't had the inclination to really consider that. We do know very much that skills matter. Formal qualifications do matter in the labour market. If you've got high-level skills, you can do what's known as bump down to lower level jobs. If you haven't got any formal qualifications, you can't bump down, and you've got people with higher qualifications sometimes competing against you. But having said that, formal qualifications aren't the be-all and end-all. A whole range of other skills matter too. Other attributes, perseverance, confidence, punctuality, reliability, motivation, all of those skills matter alongside formal qualifications. We also know that very practical issues can be important for helping people into work, things like transport and childcare. We know also that employers play an important role, and understanding employers' requirements and actually working with employers to support people when they're starting work can really play dividends in the medium and long term. And then finally, I just want to highlight, in the labour market literature at the moment, we have a whole debate on something called good work. And really there's a bigger debate now in the UK about the quality of jobs. And actually, whether and how people progress in the labour market is impacted by the quality of jobs that are there, and also young people's understanding of the employment opportunities that are out there. So those are some of the lessons there that we've learned from employment programmes over the years. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne. Are you happy to stay for a question or two?
Yeah, can do.
Any questions? Perhaps I have a question actually about the Talent Match program. I think it's a really great program. How is it going on? Is it still ongoing? Is it somehow implemented as well?
Yes, it's been going for 5 years and it's just coming to an end now, but some of the partnerships are continuing. So I think it's certainly got a legacy. I don't know whether, James, you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, if you want to know more about the Talent Match programme, our main colleagues have got a blog site at Sheffield Hallam blogs and Forbes, and we've had two great projects, well, lots of great projects in the Midlands. So if you Google Talent Match, Black Country, for instance, is a good website. Birmingham, Staffordshire, the Marches, and Coventry and Warwickshire have also had. And they've all taken slightly different approaches, but all recognising that people need to go into fulfilling work as they possibly can, and caring about, like that young man who wasn't very happy in his job. We're quite pleased that we care about whether he was happy or not. It's not brilliant that somebody on an employment programme ends up in a job where they're not happy, but Talent Match has been quite unique in finding that out.
Yeah, I think we kind of really need more of these programs, but we also need to make sure that it kind of keeps implemented and it's not just a one-off thing. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much then. Okay, our next speaker is Mary Quinton. She's a research fellow at the School of Sport, Exercise and Rehabilitation Sciences. And I'll let you find this. Okay, and Mary is going to speak to us today about a program that she is running together with Dr. Jen Cumming from Sportex as well, which is called Mental Skills Training for Life. This is a program that runs within St. Basil's, which is a charity that supports homeless young people. But I'm sure Mary will tell you more about this.
Yeah, got it.
Got it.
Cool, yeah. So as Corinne said, I'm going to talk to you today a bit about our My Strengths Training for Life programme with St. Basil's, and particularly how the outcomes of the programme are helping young people get into education, employment and training, but also maintain that as well. So first of all, just to give a bit of an overview. First of all, I'm just going to talk about the types of young people who we typically work with, and then provide a bit of rationale in terms of why we use a strengths-based approach with these young people. And then I'll talk a bit more about the programme itself, and go through some evidence of impact of the programme, and finally just a few lessons learned from us, and things that can be applied from other organisations as well. So first, just to a bit of context into the young people who we work with. I think Paul almost did this slide for me earlier. But I think it's important to mention the impact that adverse childhood experiences or ACEs can have, particularly for young people who are homeless. So for young people who are homeless, they might not have only experienced one adverse childhood experience, but actually many. And this can include things such as household or family adversity, bereavement, prejudice, or even maltreatment. And this can lead to disrupted neurodevelopment for these young people, and also social, emotional, and cognitive impairments. And that can then affect behaviours as well. So the adoption of certain risky health behaviours, even leading to things like disease and actually most severely early death. And so trauma and stress experienced at young ages really does have a negative impact, not only on these sort of things that I just mentioned, but also their developing brain, because the brain isn't actually fully developed until the age of 25. And so it can cause a dysregulation of the stress response, it can have delayed cognitive and language development, memory problems, over-response to emotional stimuli, and metacognitive skills, and also not being able to regulate behaviour as well. But the key point that I want to make is that the brain can recover from trauma for all individuals at all ages, but given the appropriate immediate and long-term intervention. And so the young people who we work with, they have complex and multiple support needs that are often interlinked. The mean age of the young people who we work with is typically around 19 and a half years. And this is an example of just one of the young people who we work with. So as you can see, there are multiple support needs here, whether it's sort of on the mental health side in terms of anxiety, ADHD, whether it's in terms of an offending history, being an expectant father, and also not in education, employment or training. But our sample is actually quite mixed in terms of this employment status, so we're quite keen to not just categorise it as either eat or neat. Actually, we like to think, okay, what are the reasons behind that? And so some young people are looking for work, some young people aren't looking for work, but that might be actually quite a sensible decision for them, because they might be, going through various mental health difficulties, or they've just become a new parent and actually they want to spend some time focusing on their child, which is completely understandable. But this is something that we're really keen to sort of not just take at face value. We want to adapt the programme to support their needs. But if you take this into consideration, this is just one young person with these support needs, and it can be a real challenge for service providers to know the appropriate support to provide to young people. Where would you start with this young person, for example? So it's really key to keep that in mind. And with all of those different support needs, it can be sometimes easy to just focus on deficits with young people or what's wrong with them. But these approaches can be quite disempowering and disaffirming for young people. And a young person who has a negative experience, if it's a deficits-based approach that you're working with the young people, then actually that can then lead to lower expectations and an affirmation of these negative labels, which can then reinforce negative behaviours, again, a focus on deficits, and it kind of goes on in this deficit cycle. And actually that can lead to opportunities being blocked for these young people. They might get prescribed interventions based on these negative behaviours, whereas, with a strengths-based approach, which I'm going to talk about, then that might be a different route. And these traditional sort of deficits-based approaches can also create a power imbalance between the helping professional and the young person. So in this case, the helping professional can almost become the expert or the fixer, and impose goals upon the client or the young person. And almost there's a bit of a mantra that the clients have to fit with them. And this then leads to the young person being perceived as someone with problems that need fixing, or that they're lacking something, or that they could be labelled as not motivated or not ready for change. And so understandably, if things are sort of viewed in this light, then it can lead to young people being quite difficult to reach for interventions, but also quite difficult to engage and maintain them in interventions as well. But if we reframe how we think, we can actually see this stage of their development as a great opportunity for intervening in a positive way and really encouraging positive development with these young people. And so within the homelessness area, there's been a shift towards positive youth development, or PYD. And it states that it's not merely removing risk factors. That doesn't guarantee developmental success. PYD actually is very systematic, and there are key parts of it. So one part is it's all about increasing young people's assets, but also increasing the awareness of the assets that they already have, and providing them with opportunities to practice and develop these assets and skills. And it's all about the environment as well, so providing a supportive environment around these young people and supportive relationships with peers and adults as well. And this is what leads to this sort of window of opportunity for optimising these young people's development and to promote thriving rather than just surviving. And this can lead to a number of positive things, but mostly adaptive and mutually beneficial relationships for the young people, and meta-developmental skills as well. And by that, I mean things such as setting meaningful goals, making plans and taking action, adjusting goals and plans, and managing cognitions and emotions as well. And so we're working together very closely with colleagues at St Basil's within a broader effort to be psychologically informed. So they have something called PI, which stands for Psychologically Informed Environment. And they very much take an organisational approach to be psychologically informed. And so positive youth development is very much kind of being psychologically informed, or PI for young people. And at this point, I just wanted to mention a program that they're running specifically for employers. They call it the Pi for Employers program. And the aim is to help employers be more psychologically minded if they are working with young people, such as those who are homeless, with the aim of helping them not only get a job, but also maintain that job and stay and thrive in that job as well. So if you want any more information on that, then their contact details are up there, and I can leave that slide up at the end as well. And now I want to go on and talk about our My Strengths Training for Life programme, which we have co-developed in partnership with the staff and young people at St Basil's. It's a PYD programme that's designed to aid young people in their ability to recognise and use the mental skills that they have, to improve their self-regulation of thoughts, feelings and behaviours, and not only develop them through the programme, but also a key point is being able to transfer them into other life domains, such as education, employment and training. And this is very much community-based research, so we were really keen to get the young people and the staff involved. So before we even went in and did this programme, we went to St Basil's and we spoke with various different staff, various different young people, and we wanted to get their perspective on, if we were to come in and do a programme, what would work for these young people. So we asked two key questions. One, what challenges already exist for these young people? And two, what are the ideal attributes needed? So we ran a number of focus groups with different young people and staff, and essentially found that there are a number of themes in terms of the results. So for the challenges, there were sort of four key themes, being the challenge of pressures of the benefit system, social issues, motivational issues, and a key one was a lack of confidence as well. And they suggested that the key attributes needed to overcome these challenges were things like life skills, interpersonal skills, self-regulation, and confidence and resilience as well, which has already been mentioned quite a lot today as well. And so this very much informed our thoughts and our delivery model for the programme. So before we go in and run a programme with young people, pre-intervention preparation is essential for us. We go into each project and we speak to staff and young people, and we're like, okay, what's going to work best here? What support needs do we have? How can we change it to sort of make sure the program's a success for this specific group? And then phase 1 is a 10-session program. It can be either twice a week for 5 weeks or once a week for 10 weeks, depending on what would work best for that project. And then phase 2, we take them on a residential course, which is an outdoor adventure education course in the Lake District, to give them a chance to sort of practice, develop the skills they've been developing in the programme, but in a completely novel environment, and quite a challenging environment as well. And then again, post-intervention, we look at how can we support the transfer of these skills into education, employment or training, or whichever route the young person wants to go down. And all of this is delivered within St Basil's psychologically informed environment. Just wanted to give an example activity of something we do in the programme. So this is an activity called the Dream Team, where we use the analogy of a sporting dream team to ask young people, okay, who is in your dream team? Who do you have around you? What's your support network, and what type of roles do different people play? And one young person said that by doing this activity, I realised my niece and nephew could be my medics because they heal any sadness or pain that I feel. More than just a good activity, it allows you the skills to transfer into real life. I now know, without hesitation, who to call in times of crisis. So just that planning ahead, knowing who she had to go to, really helped this young person. And I also wanted to make the point that although the activities are important, actually for us, managing relationships is viewed as the most valuable tool for change. So that's why the facilitators of our programme play such a key role. We like to try and create an equal power balance with the young people. So we do this by using rapport building skills, open-ended questioning, empathic listening, and it helps manage things like boundaries and ground rules and manage risks, but in a psychologically needs supportive environment. And so just wanted to talk a little about our logic model, or how we propose our programme actually works. So in terms of the inputs that we have from Positive Youth Development Area, we provide challenging but also meaningful activities, lots and lots of opportunities for skill building, and positive relationships with caring peers and adults. And this leads to an increase in their mental strengths and skills and their awareness of the skills that they already have, improving their well-being and also lowering unhealthy and risk behaviours. And then the longer-term outcomes are what we're here to talk about today in terms of education, employment and training. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the skills that young people typically say they develop throughout the programme. So one is relaxation techniques. So this young person said, you breathe in for 3 seconds and then you breathe out for 3 seconds and then you just pause. And it actually helps you focus on your breathing and it relaxes you. And it just takes your mind off things and you've got to ignore all the little distractions around you. It really does work. And they suggested that we try it. Another key one is emotional control. This young person said, I learned to control my anger. Even though I don't have an anger problem, I never knew how to control my anger, but I learned to. And I guess sometimes talking to people in a calm voice actually does help. You don't always need to raise your voice. And a key theme is definitely confidence that young people say they experience from the programme. This young person said, well, my confidence, I can feel it already, and my confidence is shooting straight up. The way I talk to people, the way I'm working in a team, I've learned that I can handle myself in those situations a lot better than what I thought I could. And so these are just examples of some of the skills, but a key part is that those skills are then transferable into the workplace or whichever route they want to go down. And in terms of the shorter term outcomes, we measure a number of different variables in terms of well-being, but the general summary is that young people are improving on these aspects of well-being from pre to post-programme. And although these might only seem like small increases, actually you have to remember the population that we're working with, the sort of typically hard to reach population. And then the longer term outcomes, from pre to post programme, again we see that there's a reduction in young people reporting as NEETs and an increase in young people reporting as EATs. And this on average happens about 5 weeks after the programme, suggesting that the programme kind of gives young people a bit of a boost in terms of then going into education, employment or training. And this is supported by the qualitative data. So one young person said, it's really helped me, just motivated me to be more focused on education. Another said, the confidence I found in myself to do the activities is the confidence I feel I need to move on to my next step, which is hopefully to find a job or volunteer. And finally, I can get up in the morning and look for jobs or go out and get a job. I don't have to wake up and put myself down. In a way, this programme has motivated me to do a lot of things. If I didn't come to this programme, I'd still be in bed sleeping really, doing nothing or just watching TV. And so just to summarise, a few of the lessons that we've learned during this programme. We think it's key to involve young people and staff in the design and delivery of the programme to make it as relevant as possible. The approaches taken need to be flexible and adaptable to support the young people's needs. And authentic and positive relationships with the facilitators is really key to success in terms of building that rapport. And these strengths-based approaches that we're taking, they're engaging and empowering for these young people from the feedback that we've had. And these core principles can be easily translated into initiatives in other programmes as well. That's all from me. Happy to answer any questions. In terms of the sample who we work with, yeah. Gender is actually quite mixed. We have probably slightly more females take part, but we also have had sort of transgender young people as well take part. Ethnicity, again, it's quite mixed. It can depend on so St Basil's have different projects, which are like the supported accommodations, and they're all across the West Midlands. So the ethnicity can depend on which projects that we go to. But in our overall sample, which is almost 400, and yeah, it's quite mixed across all of those different young people.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the attrition rate? I think you said that these young people are kind of hard to get into a program.
Absolutely,
is it also hard to keep them in?
Yeah, it can be. That's actually one of the feedback that we have from the staff is maybe if you do provide a 5-week option, then actually for some young people that might be easier for them to sort of stay engaged and almost maintain that momentum a little bit. So we give that option whether it's 10 weeks or 5 weeks. Sometimes we do see young people sort of tailing off towards an end of a programme, but actually, you know, through talks with the clinical psychologist at St Basil's, she actually said that actually that might be part of them almost not being ready to say goodbye, because you know they've come, they've taken part in this programme and they've really enjoyed it, and actually it's quite sad that it's coming to an end. So that's something that we're quite keen to readdress that now more as we go through the programme, being like, okay, it's coming to an end, how can we sort of, what are you going to get involved in next, how can we sort of keep this positive momentum going?
Yeah.
But yeah, we do experience that.
Yeah, but that's a great idea. Hey, any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, it's really good and motivating. Is there any more follow-up to see longer term? How long has the study been going to see it's sustainable as well? And
Yeah.
is there any kind of any extra support for the young people in months after they've taken the class?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. We do try and collect follow-up data as well. It can depend on whether the young person has moved on from St Basil's or not. So typically we do a follow-up about 6 months after the programme's finished. We'll do, again, questionnaires. We'll also do a follow-up focus group as well to see, okay, what's happened since the programme, what are you involved in now, and actually reflecting back, how do you think it helped you? So yeah, we've had some positive feedback from that in terms of it sort of giving them the motivation to go on, get involved in something that they might not have done before. But yeah, we do rely quite heavily on our partnership with St Basil's for that, because they're the ones who are still in contact with them. So yeah, it can depend a bit on that, but overall the young people who we do get to speak to, they tend to report positive outcomes. But yeah, there's definitely not as much data because it can be hard to keep track of. Yeah.
Thank you, that was really interesting. My question is linked to that question. How much ongoing support do the young people have from that sort of after the programme is finished?
Yeah, so typically, you know, so it depends on the accommodation that they're at, but typically the project is the staff are based there as well. So it varies whether it's sort of 24-hour staff support compared to a semi-independent project, which wouldn't be quite as much, but they do have that support there after the programme's finished. And actually that's something that we're really keen to develop in terms of, you know, we invite staff to sit in on the sessions so that actually they can follow on the conversations that we're having in terms of the skills and the strengths that they've got. Actually, just because the programme's finished doesn't mean then those support workers can't sort of follow up on those strengths and be like, okay, well, you use that in the programme, why can't we use that to sort of, you know, get you onto that apprenticeship you always wanted to do and things like that. So I guess that's one way which we try to do that.
And what kind of professional backgrounds do the MST facilitators come from?
Yeah, good question. Actually, the majority of us are from a sports psychology background. So we first started running these types of programs with athletes. So think people like Aston Villa Academy, Scottish Rugby, and MST then was very much about, okay, what are the skills that you need to perform at the highest level? So yeah, myself and others have had undergrads and then gone to do PhDs within sports psychology. But we've been working with St Basil's for about 5 years now, 5 to 6 years, and throughout that time we've done courses such as the mental health first aid training course, St Basil's psychologically informed environment training, and we also have members of the team who are sort of from a psychological background as well in terms of undergrads and masters, and one of them is here if you want to talk to me later as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mary. I would say it's time for lunch then. So we have until 3 o'clock, please. And if we can, after the break, try to set ourselves up on just a few tables so that there's about like 10 people around. So that we're kind of building groups for the group work later on. Okay. Registered attended today. So maybe you can make sure that those where there are only a few people at the table, that you could just move to one of the bigger tables so we can fill them up for 10 people. And then we'll have some group discussions to start. So one of the outcomes for the event that I was hoping to discuss is really what are actually the barriers that young people are experiencing. So we've heard a lot about programs that help young people, but not everybody has access, not everybody is aware of these programs. So really, what keeps young people from gaining employment and also from getting into education and staying in education? If you want to, you can have it as one point, or if you think they're kind of a bit different, you can also split them up. The next question is, because that's only one side of the coin, what actually maybe what are the challenges that businesses are experiencing from employing young people? There may be businesses who are really keen to employ young people, but there may be issues that they perceive. So what are those? And lastly, because we don't only want to focus on the problems, we also want to focus on solutions. How can we overcome all of these barriers? What can be done? Okay? So if you're happy to, just feel free to kind of move around, and I'll give out some zip top papers.
But it's a team effort, so people will chip in. So we discussed the barriers from a young person's perspective and from a business's perspective. And I think what we probably agreed is that it's actually very similar things. So lack of experience, but also how do you get that experience for young people is a significant barrier. But also it is a barrier for businesses as well, because they want experienced people. And it's something that sometimes stops them from actually giving people the opportunity to come on board if they don't have the experience that they require. In terms of young people, again, lack of soft skills that could be delivered through schools. For example, well, how do you complete a job application? What are the things that you write in there? How do you navigate yourself in that system? But also communication skills. So how do you behave in a work environment? I think you've given some really good examples. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we took on 6 young people on extended work experience for a couple of months, a couple of years ago, which led on to 4 apprenticeships, and they've been with us for 2 years now. They've done level 2 customer service and they're doing level 3 customer service. But something that they've really had to work on is workplace behaviours, how to behave in the workplace. And it's been quite a long and sometimes difficult journey for us as well as them in order to improve in those aspects. But it didn't occur to us really that you know, some young people just don't know what's acceptable at work, you know, how to speak to people, how to address people, how to send professional emails, all these kinds of things, things that we had to work on with the young people. But they've improved and are now thriving.
Yeah, excellent. We also talked about young people lacking sort of a confidence and sort of self-awareness and self-esteem to actually articulate their strengths, but also acknowledge that they have weaknesses. And we thought it was probably 2 things. One, either not knowing that you have certain strengths and not being able, and also not being able to, again, communicate and articulate this, for example, in a job interview. When it comes to businesses, one of the barriers is, so we've talked about working patterns, and sometimes some businesses lack that flexibility and adaptability. Investment in training and mentoring was something else that we mentioned. And support both external and internal. So both from HR, but also external organizations that could support businesses to take on young people from diverse backgrounds who might be having multiple vulnerabilities. Do you want us to go through the solutions, or are we just... Yeah? Okay. Solutions. Well, we think, but we'll see. So we thought... so you gave a very good example, didn't you, Laura, about apprenticeships and how if you're in a school, I think you go to 2 weeks.
Yeah, when you're 15, you have 2-week work experience. We're kind of talking about, how much of your life you spend in employment, that it's just not enough experience for young people, and kind of extending that from younger ages and also older ages.
So more extended periods of internships and more extended periods of work experience, sort of type of things. Targeted and person-centered mentoring, not just general mentoring, but mentoring, for example, that is targeted to young people's perceived needs. Training and development opportunities, again, very, very targeted to the young person rather than generic things, schools, sort of education in schools. Peer-to-peer support, that's something that you've mentioned. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just think it's very effective to have someone who is struggling with whatever they're struggling with paired up with someone who's walked the road, sat where they've sat, and that sort of thing. So peer mentoring is very effective as a motivational sort of guidance method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've got lots of things here, Karim. Do you want us to go on, or are we okay for time?
Yeah, maybe we can
We have lots of solutions here. Okay.
first, and then you can just chip in with the solutions. That's okay.
So again, this was a group effort. I was just sort of really writing things down. So I'll take them in order. So some of the barriers my colleague identified, young people, lack of opportunities, which seems to have got worse over the last decade or two, and that is more pronounced for people with multiple complex needs, it's differential across the group. There was also this awareness that's linked to it, really, is that free opportunities also have a social inequity about it, and it's quite hard to access voluntary work or internships. There was also an awareness that young people themselves might have an unrealistic portrayal of what working life was, and sort of focus on certain, high status jobs, with celebrity-type related jobs, so we're less willing to consider certain opportunities. So that's one of the barriers for young people, as well as sometimes, I guess, the skills they were gaining didn't actually have sort of practical cash out in terms of next steps often. In terms of the link with education, colleagues had a lot of experience in this area. They said there was issues that educational establishments were assessed on attendance rates, and some people with mental health problems could be asked to leave because they couldn't meet the attendance requirements. So again, certain groups were getting differentially affected. And again, some of the soft skills stuff came up around self-motivation and time management, and also managing finances being a challenge for lots of young people as they progress in education. For businesses, so the other side, looking at the employers, colleagues suggested there may still be a mismatch between what employers thought they needed and what they actually needed for the job, so a bit of education around that. I guess you're aware of it in all of our own jobs, I guess, is that there's a kind of ruthlessness about not investing in people, not allowing people to learn on the job, put people to be skills ready, and not training people up over time because there's an awareness we might be with you for a year or two. And we had a discussion about 0 hours contracts and how those could be a way of moving people on very quickly. Also, including our colleague Amelia, who's on one, is that also to maintain it, end up working ridiculous hours, 80 plus a week, just to keep on the good side of the employer and get further work. So it was quite a sort of healthy, dangerous thing, really. So these are some of the problems we identified. We've sort of began doing the overcoming barriers. Colleagues again spoke about something from Maria's table about sort of practical employability skills in real environment, and even simple things such as knowing how to use public transport, getting around, time management, etc. We again suggested a focus in schools on these softer transferable skills, which our colleagues have mentioned as well, and an awareness of the difficulties of league tables, that schools only really get awarded on these very high grades rather than rewarded for the very good work they do across a wider segment of the population. I think, Emma mentioned that importantly for students to know what they've got and to use their qualifications in a marketable way. I don't know how best to paraphrase it, Emma, but how to sell their degree or their qualification to employers to make it seem very relevant. There's a talk about the career service no longer being available and that being returning to use. And I guess we ended up talking a bit about how to make the jobs that are there more attractive. And colleagues spoke about things like vlogging on jobs, so people would be aware what they were, and the idea that jobs shouldn't necessarily be always about remuneration, think about vocations as well. I think that's about where we ended.
Thank you.
It seems that I wrote it down. So I wrote it down in my best handwriting. I've got to read it out as well. We had a very, very useful discussion. We've got diverse ages and experiences on our table. I think it's very valuable. Young person's perspective, identifying barriers. We talked about things like employment can seem scary, and actually applying for a job can be scary. Issues like having jargon in job adverts can put people off. Also things like nobody else like me does that kind of job. You know, is it going to be a suitable job for me? We also talked about the sort of catch-22 of without experience you can't get a job, and without a job you can't get experience. We talked a little bit about the financial implications of going to university, which can be a downside of some people might not therefore want to take that opportunity. It might not be for them. We felt, just bringing up some points that other tables have mentioned, we felt that there might need to be more information about work experience and question the value of a work experience of two weeks. The issue that people might not know about routeways into different jobs, and that the staff at schools might also not have lack knowledge of opportunities that are available and how to get on in the world of work. And I think very practical things of, I am here, how do I actually get to there? What are the different ways I can work to get to this kind of job would be very valuable. We also talked about use of that actually a do-it-yourself approach to careers, of just looking at everything on the internet. That's got some good points, but some people need a bit of guidance as well. And we also talked about, jumping ahead to number 3, about could employers go into schools. We actually had a testament from one of our colleagues on the table that the Prince's Trust had gone into their school, and it was very valuable in talking about various options. Question 2, which is about the barriers that businesses may face. I think this reiterates some points already made, that young people don't always show the soft skills, they don't always know or act as employers might expect. And also, some employers just lack experience of employing young people. So, just as young people may be a bit scared, some employers may be a bit scared of young people as well. And some may be unwilling to take a risk. And we were talking about the example of Timpsons, who've taken on ex-offenders. But how this had been really educating the staff in the organisation to actually give people a chance, and actually the benefits of having that more diverse team came through. There's also the issue of, are employers aware of where young people look for work? The young people on our table looked online. Not all employers advertise online. We also looked at the issue that from an employer's perspective, they're going to expect young people to look at what their company requires and what their company does. But we also talked about whether employers are necessarily interviewing in the right way. And one of the colleagues on the table spoke about the value of actually a more relaxed approach to interviewing as actually getting the best out of some of the candidates. And so thinking also about how employers can prepare people for interviews coming forward. And then overcoming the barriers, we spoke about things like actually getting an interview can be a real success because some jobs are so competitive. And actually feedback from employers, whether it could be online to say something like we had 300 applications, there were so many good ones we couldn't invite every good interview to come forward, but providing some hints and tips might be useful. We felt that robust careers advice would be helpful, and just also managing expectations all round of young people, employers and everybody else. And then I think we spoke finally about the value of mentors, and also about how matching peers as mentors can be very valuable. And then we finally talked about the internet and digital CVs, and wondering whether we were actually making best use of internet resources going forward. And I sensed that we could have actually overcome even more barriers if we had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Maria, was there anything left on your slide that we
Actually,
didn't?
something I think is quite important is informing young people about the number and variety of options that they have. And usually we tend to give young people a couple of options, like education, but actually there are a lot of options, and matching young people's skills and needs to those options rather than just, keeping it quite generic.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Shall we continue with our last two talks for today? Yes? Can I please introduce Dane Boyce and Polly Boyce? I hope I pronounced it correct. Dane is a trainee therapist at W University, and Dane is, please help me with that.
I'm the chair of FTB's Patient Participation Group.
Thank you very much. And they are both members of our youth advisory group at the Institute for Mental Health. So I'm very, very happy that you came here today to talk about the challenges that young people face, actually to hear from a young person. So thank you very much.
Hey everybody, first of all I want to say thank you for coming down today. I know it's always a big risk sacrificing your Saturday like this, but I feel like we've got some good ideas out for today. Unfortunately, unlike the rest of the speakers, I haven't got a fancy slideshow to show you. I just have myself and an ill-fitting suit. And unfortunately for you guys, I love the sound of my voice, so I'm just not going to stare at you for 10 minutes. I suppose my story is going to be a bit different to what we discussed today, but I actually was successful. I actually got employment, full-time employment in fact, perhaps about almost 2 years ago now. Almost to the day actually, funny old world, isn't it? And yeah, I was just coming down of a ill period of mental health due to depression and anxiety, but due to my economic circumstances, especially within the family, I felt very much like a parasite on my mother and my stepfather, as they were literally providing all their time and energy for me to make sure I was well and eating, and as well as the financial implication of having a non-working 20-something-year-old just upstairs in his bed all day was a source of stress to say the least. So I rushed into work probably before I was ready, and it kind of went as about expected. It started small at first, of course, the fear of the unknown, the working environment, actually the workplace politics, for lack of a better term, just what you say to one person in good faith is going to be spread around the office within a week, and you're perhaps not what I wanted it to be. Also that I'm quite naturally clumsy anyway, and when certain kind of jobs perhaps weren't appropriate for me, but they were often forced upon me for a variety of reasons, which actually resulted in me suffering from quite a serious degrees from burns and grills and deep fat fries. As being the clumsy person I am, I would slip on something, put a hand on a grill, I would splash down a tray of fries, splash oil over yourself, and which is not the employer's fault, of course. However, what they can control is their attitude towards it. I felt it quickly came more of an inconvenience to give me first aid and fill out action report rather than to question, okay, maybe we shouldn't put them on the defect fires, maybe we should actually train them up upon it. And that came a really big issue because I felt a big pressure and a big need to keep this job, because after all, you don't want to be a leech on your family, do you? Especially being a 20-year-old man. It really does take a knock on your pride. So I push it all down, I suppress it, which works. Well, sorry, it worked for a time, as it always does. And about 2.5 months later, the stress started manifesting itself as physical symptoms. I couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up having night terrors, being at work of all things. It sounds stupid, but I'll wake up screaming, thinking I've been locked in the walk-in freezer. And the burns, you can imagine, were rather inconvenient, especially when they start to swell, and really affects your self-esteem, especially when you're going through depression, as you can imagine. And then more serious things start happening. My indigestion started playing up. I started getting random stabbing pains in my gut, and being clumsy anyway, or something like being stabbed and falling forward like that, led to more burns, more inconvenience, more pressure, and overhearing people maybe accidentally on purpose talking a bit too loud what they really thought of you. So I ran away from work and went back home and started to recover, trying to get to myself where I was before I started that 2.5-3 month period of work. And that took me about a year. Another year of my recovery, another year of my journey, and but was I a bit over-ambitious and perhaps over-internalising, perhaps jumping straight into work? Perhaps. Should I perhaps have any more self-esteem and not to degrade and belittle myself, actually telling myself I'm worth more than a £1 burger? Perhaps. Should I perhaps been a bit more resilient, as the buzzword has been nowadays, and not let it get under my skin? Perhaps, but you might be thinking this is a tragic experience, feeling bad for me, though, surely this is a exception, it's not a rule. Well, perhaps without naming names, this employer has been named the best employer for young people in the UK for 6-7 years running now, I believe. And this is the gold standard. This is what all employers are supposed to aspire to. And I'm sure my case isn't representative of everything, and I do hope, I sincerely hope, there was an exception to the rule and not the rule itself. But I think we have an issue here that we have good ideas, we have initiative of drive around it, and that's all well and good. But we've been talking about it for years now, and perhaps, like it's been said today, speaking about stuff is easy, it's very easy. Starting an idea is hard, and sustaining it itself is virtually impossible. And perhaps what we should be focusing on is not just good ideas and people and giving that self-righteous fire in your belly to change the world. It's keeping that, letting it simmer, and sustaining that for a long period of time. Thank you very much. Thank you for politely staying awake as I droned on. And I want to invite somebody to talk who's a lot more charismatic and articulate as I am. And this is my peer, Holly, and I hope you give her the same attention you gave me. Thank you.
Got my own experience with mental health, but within education. So 4 years ago, I went to university. I was 21. It's supposed to be an exciting time when you go to uni, but it's a bit different when you've got a mental illness at the same time. So you can imagine there's quite a bit of anxiety going on. But then when you go to university, you're thrown into the deep end. You're being taught all this new information about, referencing, but also the workload that comes with it. And so you start to focus about the workload, and you're thinking, I need to be the best that I can at this. With that, you're worrying about finances. So when you go to uni, you're managing student loans. And when you've not been taught about anything like that, about budgeting or how to organise your weekly sort of income outcomes, once again, that's a lot of information and a lot to deal with at the same time. So I'm dealing with the stresses of university, the stresses of finances, and as the months keep going on, I'm worrying about, oh, how am I going to juggle uni, finances, and whilst this is all happening, I'm starting to cut off on my friends and family because I'm too focused on university. What can I do to be the best at university? And so as the months keep going on, the stress levels keep getting higher and higher, and I start to not look after myself. So in terms of eating well, that goes out the window. Sleep hygiene, and it just keeps mounting up and mounting up. So 3 months into my sort of university journey, I had no choice but to leave because my mental health got so bad it deteriorated, and so that left me in a tricky situation where I had to leave in my first semester to receive professional help. So you can see how it sort of develops over time, how the process of university has the effects on the student, especially in their first year. And not just like first year, second year and third year. And this sort of reminds me, it's a bit of a weird metaphor, but it sort of reminds me of a metaphor of a table, in that you've got a solid, sturdy table. On the top of it, you've got mental health, so that's the top bit. And each leg represents something. So a leg could represent education or employment. Another leg could represent family, friends. Another leg, finances, and another leg could represent self-care. If you take one of those legs away, obviously the table starts to become a bit wobbly and not so stable. And then if you take another leg away, it becomes even more unstable, until eventually if you take all the legs away, the table just collapses. And that's a bit like what happened in my experience, in that if I have no support while I'm at university, how can I be expected to flourish? So this is the tricky situation that a lot of students have to go with at the moment. And so that's a big barrier that I had to face along with other students. So how did I overcome that barrier? So I took a year out to recover with experiencing my mental illness. And through that year out, it took a lot of encouragement to decide to go back to uni the following year. But something changed when I went back, in that I got support from the university. They supported me by being aware of my mental illness, trying to understand how they could be there for me, in able to sort of cope when I do struggle with university work or any other convenience that's going on in my life. They provide me with a mentor, and by having a mentor was like the best thing that could ever happen to me whilst at university, because I could talk to them about anything in terms of struggles with workload, anything personal going on in my life, and they would be able to support me through that. And my mentor supported me throughout my 3 years until this year when I graduated from uni. And it just shows you, going back to the metaphor table, that if you have the right support in place, students like me and so many other students can flourish. And so, yeah, it goes back to what we're here for today, and it's been brought a lot in conversation as well, in that how can we overcome these barriers? And a lot of it does come back to support, by having the right support in place. Students or young people in general, whether that's employment or education, they can do so much better in their lives just by having that support in place. And I'll stop droning on now, so thank you.
Thank you so much. That was two absolutely fantastic talks. Any questions from your side? Lane and Holly are prepared and agreed to take any questions. So, well, maybe I'll start with a question. Is there anything that you think that could have helped you during that time, that could have made a difference, or do you feel that you kind of had to go through this in order to get out of this right now, if you know what I mean? Is there anything at the time that could have helped you? Any person, any support, anything really?
Should I start? Me personally, I think hours of themselves once upon a it was been consistency of hours. I'm sure everybody's realised here once I've worked for an amount of time that you start getting into a routine with your day, with your week, with your month. However, my stuff was very sporadic, like I'd be working mornings, evenings, nights, and it could change every week and also the days I was working on. So I was just pretty much living day to day, and when I wasn't working, I was just sleeping. And that was a very poor work-life balance. As you can imagine, it was just all work. And I think actually being taken to one side and being spoken to and actually had some sustainable hours put in place, like the same days I'm working, the same shifts I'm working, that way I got into a routine and start maintaining my balance a lot more. So that way I could cope with stress better with friends, family, hobbies, as people normally do. And then I wouldn't have reached crisis because I would have like it's been touched on so many times today, I would have the balance, I would be fulfilling, but because it was all work. That's why I relapsed in my illness.
With myself, I'd probably say when you sort of first go to university, universities tend to offer a health check, but that's just more for like physical health, where I feel that because at the time the university weren't aware of my mental illness, which is often the case with most students in that they go to uni without knowing that they've got a mental illness in the first place. I feel like if they were to do like a mental health check when you first go to university, that way the university can be made more aware of that person's needs, but perhaps also discover that they are struggling at the time when they go to university and support in that way as well.
At the time, if there was a check, or would you have basically be able to yourself refer yourself to some help? Or do you think you were actually quite aware of what was happening?
It was a tricky situation because in the end I did refer myself to help, but at the time I wasn't really sure what was happening. Yeah. But I feel like if there was a mental health check when I first went to university and so if I was to go to that, then maybe the university would have picked it up quicker and say, we're concerned about you and so on.
Excellent talk, really good to hear you. And a question for you, Lane, and I guess I was struck when you talked about yourself using words like parasite and how particularly hard is it as a young man not being in work and relying on your mum and stepdad mentioned. I guess how do you think you progressed with that? I guess I was struck by you were aware that a lot of young men have very high rates of mental health problems and particularly sort of suicide now increasing. Have you managed to do it less hard on yourself over time? Managed to think differently about allowing yourself not to have time when you're doing work?
I think that's a good question. That's a good question, and my answer probably isn't going to be true for a lot of people, but I'm rather logical and detached, especially when it comes to matters myself. So instead of viewing myself as a parasite, I started viewing myself as an investment of time, energy, love, and money from my mother, and to kill myself, to cut my arm, would not pay a good payout on the investment, so to speak, by the clinical terms. So I need to take responsibility for myself and my illness and my life when I'm capable, which is why when I started recovering the following year and started getting involved with other things, I started viewing that as a return on investment, so to speak. And I suppose from a roundabout way, I have also become less hard on myself as I'm actually doing things now and I can't control the outcome, so I can control my actions. And it doesn't matter if it pans out. The fact I'm trying in the first place is a lot easier to deal with that failure rather than just being in bed all day. So perhaps not the answer you were expecting or the answer would apply to most people. But yeah, I suppose instead of changing the way I think, I just changed from the angle I was thinking from it from, and I compared to that. That was. So any other questions?
Because you both have taken time out to recover from those experiences. During that time out to recover, what was the most helpful things? What services, or was it support of family, or what helped you to make that recovery when you took time out?
Well, I because I sort of referred myself. I received treatment, I did. So that was sort of the big step. And yeah, that's quite, it's intense as expected, but also just having that support with my family as well, in that, you know, they know I was going through this difficult time in my life, but they were willing to be there to support me through that time. After I received the treatment, I was still sort of receiving sort of outpatient support, but it was quite an empty time as well, because I just had this gap until uni, so I was trying to find things that I actually enjoyed doing, so trying to find different hobbies, or just trying to keep myself occupied and keep myself busy, so that I didn't, you know, sort of relapse again. But my main sort of focus was, you know, in terms of recovery, was sort of wanted to go back to uni, but not just to like sort of get good grades, but to sort of prove that I can do it. And so that was sort of my main focus in recovering.
Very simple question, a good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a simple answer for you. Different stages during my recovery, for lack of a better term, different treatments worked the best for me. So early on, I feel counselling, talking therapy was a big help for me. However, as my journey progressed, that stopped being helpful. So more different treatments were more appropriate. I'm not sure how local you are. Have you heard of a drop-in clinic called Paul's in Digbeth?
I've heard of it, but yeah.
Yes, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's a drop-in mental health service for 0 to 25 near the ballroom, and you go in and you see somebody and you have a chat for low-level mental health needs, which that was at the time, that's where I was low-level. I wasn't sunshine and rainbows, but I wasn't about to jump off the building. I was very awkward in between. So that was very helpful. But again, once I started progressing again, that was no longer appropriate or as effective as I wanted it to be, and I kind of, again, stagnated. So then I got involved in volunteering in mental health services, in particular Pub Squad, which is a service user participation group at Paul's. I just basically paid quality control for any ideas, thoughts and queries I had, which I found really revealing. It was kind of like a look behind the curtain, a magician feeling their tricks, if it makes sense. Instead of being this mysterious Leviathan, I got to know the ins and outs, which then helped me process my mental illness as more of a something more concrete and less supernatural. I know that sounds very weird, but I was rather ignorant of my illness for a variety of reasons quite a long time, and actually putting facts to it helped me put things that happened onto the illness and not onto myself. It was the illness's fault, it wasn't a fault of my character or personality. And from that I got involved, self-plug alert, with Institute Mental Health, which is running this today. So, again, which I find very fulfilling, because again, as Holly said, you've kind of got a space, you've got a gap where you're feeling miserable and everything's a blur. And it's a waste of a good portion of your life, especially when you're kind of young like this and everybody tells you these are your best years and what's going to happen is going to define the next 15, 20 years. No pressure, but you kind of got to be happy. You can, like, taking that, then twisting it, and again, perhaps not a popular opinion, but please, anger, channeled in the right ways, is one hell of a motivating factor. And that anger, towards that wasted time, that illness and frustration, kind of twisted and wrestled and kind of misstrewn, motivated me to try and get better, motivate to speak to you guys today. And again, I'll keep on doing this till I feel the need where perhaps I've stagnated, and I'll change it again, because I'm on a journey, so a one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately, it's not possible, so I have to keep everything adaptive to my needs, which is a very long way of rambling on. Have I answered your question?
Very,
thank
you.
Any more questions?
Just one more, really, but thank you both, that's really enlightening. But Holly, you sort of came alive when you mentioned mentoring and that you experienced. I was just wondering if mentoring at an earlier stage would have been something that you think might be beneficial, whether for you or for others in general, maybe at a school stage?
I think, me personally, I think mentoring was such a beneficial thing to ever happen to me whilst I was at uni. And I think if I had received it when I first went to uni, I think it would have made me sort of become more aware of my mental illness and how to cope with it at the time. Because mentoring is just, it's so different in that it's not counselling or anything. It's just about having one-to-one sessions with a person that you see, you know, once a week, but just you can just talk to them about anything, and they're not going to judge you in terms of what you're feeling or what you're going through, and just, you know, and they're really there to listen to you and be there for you every step of the way, and because all they want to see is that you really excel yourself. I mean, the mentor that I had, he was just, you know, I got on with him like a house on fire because we had the same sort of qualities and things that we liked and that. And that's a really important thing about mentoring, in that you pair that person with someone who's going to be like proper fitted and sort of use that relationship to sort of make something bigger happen. Is just, I really, and in terms of the like schools as well, I think mentoring would be really beneficial in schools, because once again this got talked today about how in schools, well, I think in life you never know where you're really going. Let's be honest. You say at school, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. Go to college, I don't know what I'm going to do. University, after, still don't know what I'm going to do. But just by having that, like a person to talk to, they may be able to help you sort of realise, actually, this is what I want to do in life.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll have about half an hour left for our last activity, and I'm not sure if you like it. So what I'd like you to do is, on each of the 3 tables that you are, take maybe a pen and take your name tag and put a number from 1 to 10 there, okay? So maybe just go around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? 1, 2, 3. Anyone who doesn't have a name tag, So once you're there, once everybody has a number, well, maybe at this stage I'll take my name off for a second, because I would like to go with Shay and his colleagues around to see perhaps if we can find a few volunteers who are happy to say half a minute into the camera as well. Okay? So please get into pairs on each of the tables. So if you're number 1, the first pair you are is with number 2. If you're 3, then you pair with number 4. Number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? So if you want to, you can stay seated. If you feel that you want to stand up, that's fine as well. So in these 3 minutes, every pair gets 3 minutes, okay? It's kind of a speed dating thing, but just not supposed to find a partner here today. It's just about just to get to know each other. We had some very general group discussions, so this is just going to be a bit more personal, okay? So just get to know each other. Perhaps you've made contact with somebody who could come in really handy if you're a young person, or if you're an academic or a therapist, etc. So just what I'd like you to do is briefly introduce yourself. So what's your name, what are you doing, what brings you here today? And then also based on your own experience, I don't know, as a teacher, as a researcher, etc. What do you think would really help young people to get into employment and education? Okay? Also make sure that you kind of swap. So it's only, as I said, 3 minutes. And then I'll try to get my phone to work to make a sound, or at least I'll say 3 minutes over, please swap, okay? So after those 3 minutes, you'll swap to the next person. So if you're number 1, you would speak to person 3, for example, okay? And I know it can be a bit messy, but just try to make it work. Try to use the next half an hour to get to speak to everybody on your table, okay? Does this make sense? Okay. And ready, I'll try to put the time on this one.
I work at a school, at a high school, and so I'm working with young teenage people. I'm a school nurse. I'm also doing a counselling degree as well. My belief in the young is to give them and encourage them and to give them that self-confidence that they might not have had throughout their life.
So hi, I'm Emma and I'm a Graduate Development Officer for a non-profit called Creative Support, who provides social care across the whole of England. In Birmingham we run the Birmingham Mental Health Recovery and Employment Service, which is a service which is kind of tailored to help people kind of improve their mental health overall, help with their recovery journey, and if they're interested, get them into employment as well. We do this through a variety of different methods, but it kind of focuses on one-to-one support planning, therapeutic group activities and social support. I came along today because we're really keen to get young people involved in our service and to help them with their kind of mental health recovery in the long term. A lot of the stuff that we do focuses around like recognising your strengths and kind of learning coping mechanisms to help you in the long term, and I think that that is really important when it comes to employment opportunities for young people.
Hi, my name's Kevin Clark from the Engage team at Solihull Council, and we work in early help and intervention, and we support young people with mental health issues through offering things like extended work experience opportunities. So we have young people who will stay with us for about 10 weeks, 2 days a week, offering them meaningful work experience, working on actual work tasks. Originally, these work experience placements did lead on to some apprenticeship opportunities as well. We took on 4 apprentices. We're not in a position to be able to take on any more apprentices, but we do still offer that extended work experience for young people who are NEET. And they're finding it very valuable. It's adding to their skills, increasing their employability, and they're moving on into positive destinations after they finish the work experience with us. So I've come along today to find out more about the work that's going on in this field, supporting young people with mental health difficulties, and what we can do as colleagues to help best support them.
Hi, I'm James Godsall. I work for the Big Lottery Fund and I work on a funded programme called Talent Match, which works with young people who've been unemployed for more than a year. So I have got a professional interest in what we've been talking about today, but this is one of the more interesting things that I've been to over the 5 years, especially because we've got real young people here who've said some really interesting things and have shared with us about their mental health challenges. And we do find that amongst young people, especially young people who are struggling with employment and education, that mental health is a really big issue these days, and one that everybody needs to talk about, but can be quite tricky for people to engage with and deal with. So practical things like today's event, where we talk about what people can do and how important it is and come up with some solutions, I find are really useful.
So my name is Jeremy Grant and I have found today very, very useful. I think for me it's just connecting with the stories, especially the ones that we've just heard, about those who've got lived experience of mental health. I have lived experience of mental health. I turned my life around using poetry, and I now run a mentoring project called Form 180, which is all about helping young people to build their skills and develop their characters so that they can raise their aspirations and turn their lives around. I think for me, if you can get to a place where you understand why you've gone through what you've gone through, and you're able to turn somebody else's life around by saying to them, well, this is what I've experienced, this is what I've suffered with, I've sat where you've sat, I've been where you've been, but you have your own experience and you can help somebody else. Hopefully you can use some of that.